I'm delighted to be here again, and I want to thank all of you, and I want to especially thank the 5G group they didn't exist last time I spoke here, so I'm very pleased to see that development. I'm going to talk with you about what we know now about 5G, wireless radiation and health, and what we can do now. I want to dedicate this talk to two very special women, Maria Auguste, who died at age 30, and Callie Pavano, who's struggling now with a very grave illness. I want to thank them for their courage, and I will explain who they are in more detail in a moment. You've heard about my credentials. I guess the only point to tell you is this. I've spent more than 40 years of my life working in public health. I've worked with the World Health Organization, I've worked with the US government, I've worked with the French government, the Israeli government, and I never imagined I'd spend this much time talking on this issue because I thought it was pretty straightforward. But as Steve just mentioned in his introduction, when I was a young scientist at the National Academy of Sciences, I was involved in the question of, is it dangerous to expose children to tobacco smoke? Believe it or not, that was a question in the 1980s. And some of you may be, like me, old enough to remember when there was smoking on airplanes. It was a pretty stinking experience to fly any long flight. And we were able to show that over a very short flight, the so-called non-smoking section had as much fine particulate air pollution in it as the smoking section. But even though we showed that, it took years before actions were taken to ultimately get rid of smoking on airplanes. Now, I would suggest that where we are now with 5G and wireless radiation is unfortunately in the same place. We have the science. I'm going to share it with you today. We have even more science now than we may have had on tobacco. And we know that a lot of the negative studies we have, and there are a lot of negative studies, are biased because they're not really studying what we're going to be exposed to. And those few studies that do use a pulsed signal, that do appropriately study the technology, whether 3G, 4G, or 5G, they find consistent evidence of damage, some of which I'm going to show you today. Now, I've written a couple books. They're available on Amazon, Secret History of the War on Cancer, and the one, Disconnect, the Truth About Cell Phone Radiation. The type of evidence that you can rely on for understanding effects on humans is really these three major types of studies. There's exposure and modeling studies that I'll show you briefly, where we use computers to estimate exposure. There's experiments on animals and cell cultures, and I want to stress something about the experiments on animals, okay? We study animals, we study drugs in order to predict harm in humans and prevent it. Every compound that we know for sure causes cancer in people will produce it in animals when adequately studied. That's why we have an FDA when it comes to drugs. But the FDA is missing in action when it comes to wireless radiation. They are not doing their job of an adequate survey of the scientific literature, and I will make that clear. Toxicology and animal studies are used to predict and prevent harm. Epidemiologic studies, which I also am an epidemiologist, and clinical observations only tell you about damage that has already happened. They confirm the past. So you should never require proof of human harm before taking steps to prevent it. We should pay more attention to animal studies. And now I want to show you some very disturbing patterns that have happened. This is a report from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Have any of you ever seen it or heard of it? This report was done of over 40 million of their clients, just to look at the question of what is the health of younger Americans, so-called millennials. And they reported unprecedented deterioration in their health. They found these changes in a number of major conditions, behavioral conditions, cardiovascular conditions, endocrine conditions. A 21% increase in certain types of serious chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, an unexplained increase in atrial fibrillation in young people who were constantly carrying devices close to their body. Cancer rates in Gen X are much higher today than they were in the same generation in the 1990s. Rectal cancer. Has anyone here know of someone with rectal cancer who's in their 40s, 30s? 14, age 14, and without a family history? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that. And the thing is that doctors don't even suspect the possibility of cancer in such a young person like that. And we are seeing more and more cases. And each one is a tragedy. The fact that they make up statistics like this is an indictment of a failure of the public health system. Now, I cannot prove what is behind these trends. I cannot prove it. But what else has changed so rapidly since the 1990s? What else has changed? That's what we have to ask ourselves when we see this kind of trend. We have to look at these trends. We have to understand what's going on. And now I want to share with you what Callie Pavano has to say about this.
My story is that I was diagnosed with a stage 3 tumor in my left leg. After much research, I learned that it very likely was caused by my laptop, which I kept on my left leg for hours upon hours at a time. It affected me in many ways as a runner. And then as a result of the information that I found, I learned that it is not only the laptops, it is the mobile devices. And my mission is to create awareness so that this doesn't happen to anyone ever again. But it's simple. It's just about being smart. It's just about being smart. Don't put your phone in your bra. I put it on, if I'm going to use my cell phone, I put it on speakerphone. Are there times where you can't hear it? Yeah, of course. And of course, there are times, of course, I use it the way you're not supposed to, up against your head. But it's not that hard. If I know that, as I said, if I'm going to wear it in my armband, if I'm at the gym, I put it in airplane mode. It's simple. Airplane mode. It's that easy. Or turn it off. So it's really not that hard. It's just a slide of the device. And if people don't believe me, all they have to do is they can look at the legal disclaimer, which is online for their cell phone. It's fairly easy to find this information. Well, no, I'm sorry. It's not that easy. It's pretty elusive, actually. I apologize. I take that back. It's not easy to find this information. I had to dig deep. I had to dig really deep and really scroll through all of the information in the owner's manual for my laptop, where I found on page 11, keep this 8 inches away from your body. So if absolutely nothing else, that parents will protect their children. That is my goal. I do not want children to be exposed to this. They trust us, they rely on us. So my goal is that whether it's in life or death, that my story will inspire others to spread the word and not be afraid that people are gonna think they're crazy. My goal is that even after I'm gone, I want people to know my story. I want people to know Susie's story too, because I promised her I'd keep it going. Never give up, never ever give up, never back down. And as I said early on, my motto is I won't back down, and that applies in many ways. I'm not backing down to this cancer. I'm not giving up yet, but it's also I will not back down in regard to spreading this word?
Well, unfortunately, she's quite ill right now. We're always hopeful because that remains the most important drug for any cancer patient. But we know that cancer rates now have this unexplained increase in millennials and in younger and younger people. We know because Kelly has experienced it as she's proof of the statistics